The learning outcomes for this lesson include understanding the function and regulation of water and electrolyte balance, and to be familiar with the adverse performance and health effects of dehydration, hypohydration, hyperhydration, and hyponatremia. But we also want you to be able to identify the fluid and electrolyte recommendations for exercise or during the time that your client is actively training. Another outcome for this lesson includes being able to assess fluid balance using changes in weight from pre to post-exercise. When you're training clients, it will definitely be helpful if you understand how sport drinks can help support maintaining fluid balance before, during, and after exercise. And the last outcome is related to understanding the effects of heat and cold or the environment on fluid needs in athletes and active clients. Total body weight comprises about 60% within a range of 45 to 70% of water. People with more muscle mass have a higher percentage of body water than those with more body fat, since water composes about 74% of muscle and organ weight, but only about 20 to 30% of adipose tissue. Because men generally have a higher percentage of lean body mass than women, they typically hold a higher percentage of water in their total body weight. For example, men less than 40 years of age average about 60 to 65% of their body as water, while women of the same age average about 50 to 55%. Therefore, as a percentage of total body weight, a very lean male may have a body water content of 70%, while an obese man might only have about 50% water. As people age, muscle mass usually will decline, decreasing total body water content. There's almost a feeling of being refreshed as you hear the next comment, but water acts as a lubricant that bathes every tissue and cell in the body. It's a transport medium in which many compounds like nutrients, drugs, hormones, and peptides can be transported to the cells. It's also the medium in which waste materials are removed from the body by way of the kidneys, and the medium in which many bodily solutes, both organic and inorganic, are dissolved. Water is necessary for numerous chemical reactions within the body, especially metabolic reactions involved in energy production. Water is a structural part of body tissues such as proteins and glycogen, and water is extremely important in the regulation of body temperature. So if the body is not cooled properly through sweating, severe metabolic consequences can occur, including death. Electrolytes such as sodium, chloride, potassium, calcium, and magnesium ions, as well as many other small molecules, play an important role in fluid balance. And we have to consume electrolytes in food and beverages in order to maintain a fluid balance. Since water can easily diffuse across cell membranes, it's the chemical activity and concentration of the ions and small molecules like glucose or albumin that determine body water distribution within the various compartments. The more concentrated the solutes are within a particular compartment, the greater their osmotic pressure is, and thus the greater their ability to attract water. Electrolyte losses in sweat appear to be highly variable depending on when the sweat sample is taken and from which part of the body during exercise, your client's ability to acclimate to the environment, and even physiological differences between individuals. Research methods for collecting sweat during exercise and estimating total electrolyte losses are pretty cumbersome and can be very time-consuming. It's not therefore surprising that values for sweat electrolyte concentrations in the research literature vary dramatically. Although many minerals are lost in sweat, including sodium, chloride, potassium, magnesium, calcium, and iron, the primary electrolytes lost are sodium and potassium. How does the body know when it needs water? What triggers the thirst response? How does the body know when fluid and electrolyte needs have been met? The body has an intricate way of regulating body water by way of the stimulation of thirst and by way of the regulation of fluid loss through the kidneys, for example, increasing or decreasing output as needed. The body is constantly assessing fluid balance and adjusting both intake and output to maintain total body water at an optimal level. For example, if blood volume decreases due to an increase in fluid loss and sweat, the body responds by constricting the blood vessels to increase blood pressure, reducing fluid loss by way of the kidney, and stimulating the thirst mechanism. All of these responses help increase blood pressure and restore fluid balance by decreasing the total vascular space, reducing the possibility or probability of losing even more water in the urine. By itself, Thirst is not an adequate sign of hydration status, because by the time a person is thirsty, they are likely already mildly dehydrated. However, to follow the cues of thirst, this clearly means that it's time for your client to drink some water or fluids. While more in-depth techniques performed in a lab or clinic might be more accurate than making educated guesses with your client, they are often a lot more impractical on a regular basis or during training because we don't have access to this kind of equipment typically. There are some simple ways to assess or measure fluid balance, however. When urine is pale in color like lemonade and there is plenty of it, this is a good sign of adequate hydration. If urine, on the other hand, is dark like apple juice or scant, it is crucial to consume more fluids. If someone is taking vitamin supplements, urine color may not be a good marker of hydration status. The riboflavin in most multivitamins will give urine a darker color. In these cases, you'd want to go by volume. But we also need to look at how to assess our client's hydration status using their weight. So we would have our client weigh themselves without any clothes before and, of course, after a workout. The difference in weight would be primarily from fluid loss. Ideally, we want our client to consume 20 to 24 ounces of a non-alcoholic fluid or drink for every 1 pound of sweat that's lost. The goal of drinking fluids during exercise is to be able to maintain plasma volume and electrolytes, prevent abnormal elevations in heart rate and core body temperature, and to provide fuel to the working muscles. This in turn is believed to delay fatigue and prevent severe fluid imbalances that may occur during exercise when no fluid is consumed by your client. The ability for consumed fluids to replace what is lost during sweat depends on factors such as exercise duration and intensity, the volume and composition of the fluid, environmental conditions, drinking frequency, and the nutritional status of your client before exercise. No single beverage and no single volume can meet the needs of all active individuals in all exercise situations. Sweating rates vary among sports and individuals and between genders and also differ depending on environmental factors, intensity of exercise, fitness status, age, and your client's ability to acclimate to their environment. Sweating rates vary most dramatically according to gender, environmental temperature, and exercise intensity, but sweat factors are also influenced by age. A younger athlete will have a slower sweating rate than adults, and factors such as a smaller body mass and lower metabolic rate probably account for this difference. The main goal of post-exercise rehydration is to replace the water and electrolytes that are lost during exercise. And this is particularly critical if your client is an elite athlete in training whereby a second training session is planned for the same day or within 4 to 8 hours. Full restoration and balance of fluid can take anywhere from 4 to 24 hours, and your client should begin their fluid recovery immediately with water or a sport drink, followed by a meal containing electrolytes and more fluid in the form of water ingested within 1 hour after physical activity. In fact, studies have shown that the ingestion of additional sodium through food, along with plenty of water, enhances fluid retention to a greater extent than a sodium-containing sport drink alone. The volume of fluid consumed should be greater than the volume of sweat lost because losses of fluid in the urine and in respiration also need to be recovered. Ultimately, there is no general agreement among researchers on the optimal foundation of a sport drink, nor is there an ideal beverage that will satisfy all conditions. Ideally, the optimal sport drink for any one person would depend on the duration and intensity of the exercise, the environmental conditions, and the characteristics of the client or the individual. Although we don't have an optimal sport drink or an oral rehydration solution, any drink that has both electrolytes and carbohydrate can enhance fluid balance. The sport drink or fluid that's consumed as a replacement solution should contain 4 to 8% carbohydrate from multiple sugars such as glucose, sucrose, fructose, and maltodextrin. Depending on the fluid replacement strategy, more or fewer carbohydrates will be consumed from the sport drink. In many cases, clients will add extra carbohydrates from gels, blocks, jelly beans, bars, or foods, targeting a total carbohydrate intake from various sugars and sources. Dehydration during physical activity in the heat provokes greater performance decrements than similar activities done in cooler conditions, a difference thought to be due, at least in part, to greater cardiovascular and thermoregulatory strain associated with heat exposure. Now, additional research is needed to produce greater understanding of the effects of low-level hydration and dehydration on physical performance. But for now, we can generalize that when training focus or a competitive performance is at stake, being well hydrated is better than being underhydrated or dehydrated. Oral fluid ingestion during exercise helps clients to restore plasma volumes to near pre-exercise levels and prevents the adverse effects of dehydration on our client, on their muscular system, their muscular strength, their endurance, and their coordination, as well as their mental focus. Dehydration also poses a serious health risk because it increases the risk of cramps, heat exhaustion, and life-threatening heat stroke. Since water is recognized to be the most important macronutrient, take time to make sure that your client understands their hydration needs.